Have you ever stopped to wonder if there could be a deeper, maybe even a spiritual reason behind physical illness? Well, that's the really provocative question at the very heart of Art Mathias's book, Biblical Foundations of Freedom. So today, we're going to unpack the book's core arguments and explore its pretty unique take on faith, health, and spiritual conflict. Okay, let's dive right in. So right off the bat, the book hits you with this question, and it really challenges our modern way of thinking about health, doesn't it? We're not just talking about positive thinking here. The author is suggesting a direct cause and effect link between our spiritual state and our physical well-being. It is a bold claim, for sure, and it's the foundation for everything else we're about to cover. And this isn't just some abstract theory for the author. The whole book was actually born out of his own intense struggle with a condition called environmental illness. After trying literally everything else, he came to this startling conclusion you see in the quote. His healing was being blocked, not because of a lack of faith, but because of his own unrepentant sin. And that personal aha moment, that's really the key to understanding the book's entire message. So, all of that brings us to the book's core premise, this spiritual link to illness. In this first part, we're going to explore the author's argument that the choices we make in our spiritual lives can have a direct, tangible impact on our physical health. Here's how the book explains it. Just like breaking a law of physics has real physical consequences, the book argues that breaking a spiritual law has spiritual and, get this, potentially physical consequences too. Sin, from this perspective, isn't just a mistake. It creates a spiritual separation from God. And that separation can show up as what the book calls a curse, with disease being a major example. It's a huge shift in perspective, right? It reframes illness from being just a biological problem to being a potential spiritual one. Now, to really grasp this link between sin and illness, the book introduces this framework of a cosmic conflict. It argues that all of us, whether we realize it or not, are part of a spiritual war between two totally opposite kingdoms. So, in this next section, let's break down the two sides of this conflict and see how they show up in our daily lives. The author points to the Apostle Paul's famous words here to make a really crucial point. Our real struggles often aren't with the people around us. According to this view, they're with unseen spiritual forces. This idea completely transforms how you might see conflict, reframing it as a battle between two fundamentally opposed kingdoms. And this slide just lays it all out for us, plain and simple. On one side, you have God's kingdom, which is all about qualities like love, peace, and forgiveness. And on the other side, you've got Satan's kingdom, which is defined by things like rejection, hatred, and lies. The argument of the book is that every choice we make, every single thought we entertain, is actually aligning us with one of these two natures. Now, this brings us to the book's very specific definition of sin, and it's probably not what you're used to hearing. It's not just a mistake or a bad habit. In this framework, sin is the active expression of Satan's nature in our lives. It's what happens when we choose to operate out of hatred or unforgiveness or deception. It's basically a conscious choice to align with the opposing kingdom. So, if we're in a spiritual war, you gotta ask, what are the enemy's primary weapons? Well, the book argues that the main strategy is deception, and the main tool for that deception is accusation. So, in this next part, let's dig into Satan's playbook and see how this whole strategy works. The book breaks down accusation into three key forms. First, accusing God to us, planting thoughts like, God doesn't really love you. That undermines our faith. Second, accusing others to us, which creates all that division and conflict. And finally, and maybe the sneakiest one of all, accusing ourselves to ourselves, which just sends us into a spiral of shame and self-hatred. The goal for all three, it's exactly the same, to create separation. And look, this idea isn't just pulled out of thin air. It's rooted in Scripture, which literally calls Satan the accuser. The book really stresses that this isn't just some title. It's his main job. It's this constant, relentless barrage of lies that are designed to cut our connection with God and with each other. Okay, so if the weapon is lies, where's the fight actually happening? The book is crystal clear about this. The main battlefield is your mind. So in this section, we'll explore how this internal war is fought and how it affects our spiritual and, yes, our physical well-being. According to the author, every spiritual attack kicks off with just a single thought. It's a subtle infiltration. A little seed of doubt, a whisper of accusation, a tempting lie just planted in our minds. So this isn't some battle of swords and shields, it's a battle for control of our own internal narrative. And when these lies take root and we start to believe them, they build what the book calls strongholds. And no, we're not talking about physical castles here. These are mental fortresses. They are these deeply ingrained patterns of negative thinking, built brick by brick with lies, that end up becoming our default way of seeing ourselves and the world. They're basically prisons we can build for ourselves in our own minds. So, how in the world do you break free from these mental strongholds? The book points to this powerful verse as the absolute key. The solution isn't to just try and ignore these negative thoughts, but to actively confront them and take them captive. This is the real turning point in the book, where we stop just understanding the problem and start learning how to actually fight back. And that brings us to our final and most practical section, the toolkit for freedom. If we're fighting a spiritual war in our minds, what are our weapons? Well, the book provides a really clear and practical arsenal for winning this internal battle. The book lays out this awesome 3-part spiritual toolkit. First up is discernment, just the ability to tell the difference between a lie and the truth. Second is taking thoughts captive, the active process of dismantling those lies. And third, forgiveness, what the book calls the master key that unlocks the chains of bitterness and resentment. Each one of these is presented as absolutely essential for getting to a place of spiritual freedom. And this slide gives us a practical 4-step playbook for taking thoughts captive. It's a mental discipline you can learn and practice. First, you identify the accusing thought. You actually become aware of it. Second, you test it against the truth of Scripture. You ask, does this line up with what God says about me? Third, if it's a lie, you demolish it. You flat out refuse to give it any more space in your head. And finally, you replace it with the truth. This is the core practice of the book, the central way to achieve freedom. The author puts a huge emphasis on discernment, presenting it almost like a spiritual immune system. Discernment is the ability to spot and reject toxic thoughts before they can do any real damage. Weakness, then, in this context, is like a compromised immune system. You can't tell the difference between what's helpful and what's harmful, and that leaves you vulnerable to every lie that comes your way. And wow, when it comes to forgiveness, the book sets an incredibly high bar, and it's all symbolized by this number, 70 times 7. This comes from a story in the Gospel of Matthew where Jesus tells his followers to forgive not just 7 times, but 70 times 7. The point isn't about the literal number, of course, but about the idea of limitless forgiveness. It's not a one-time thing. It's a continuous, relentless way of life. This brings us to a really crucial and maybe even challenging point. The book presents our own forgiveness from God as conditional. According to this verse, our ability to receive God's forgiveness is directly tied to our willingness to give forgiveness to others. It's framed not just as a nice suggestion, but as a non-negotiable principle of spiritual life. It's the key to staying right with God and protecting yourself from the poison of bitterness. And so, we end with the question that really gets to the very heart of this book. What lies have you believed? The author's challenge is for each of us to turn inward, to become detectives of our own thoughts, and to start the process of dismantling the false stories that might be holding us back. It's a deeply personal journey, and it's one that, according to this book, is the key to true spiritual freedom.